The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Congressional Subcommittee on Children and Families requests your testimony regarding the Child Welfare Modernization Act. Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please confirm availability. I stared at my laptop screen in the dim light of my home office, surrounded by case files and policy research that had consumed my evening. 15 years of social work practice, 5 years developing evidence-based intervention programs, countless late nights documenting outcomes and writing policy recommendations. All leading to this moment, an invitation to testify before Congress about child welfare reform. I confirmed my availability and spent the next 36 hours preparing testimony that would translate complex social work practice into language that lawmakers could understand and act upon. The policy research I'd been conducting quietly for years suddenly felt urgent and vital. But first I had dinner plans with my parents. Wednesday evening at their house, the same weekly tradition we'd maintained since I moved back to the DC area after graduate school. Dad's famous barbecue chicken, Mom's potato salad, and inevitably, Dad's gentle but persistent questions about when I'd consider a more practical career. Jennifer's here. Mom called as I walked through their front door carrying a bottle of wine in my laptop bag. The familiar scent of Dad's barbecue sauce filled the house, mixing with the sound of evening news from the living room television. "How was work today, sweetheart?" Dad asked, emerging from the kitchen with grilling tongs in hand. At 71, he still handled all outdoor cooking duties with the precision of his former engineering career. "Busy," I replied, setting my wine on the kitchen counter. "Finished a major project that's been consuming most of my time lately." "Another report about troubled families?" he asked, and I could hear the familiar concern in his voice. "I worry about you spending so much time around those situations." Dad had never understood my choice to pursue social work. As a retired aerospace engineer who'd spent 40 years designing systems that either worked perfectly or failed catastrophically, he struggled with the ambiguous nature of human services work. Problems that couldn't be solved with mathematical precision frustrated his analytical mind. "The families aren't troubled," I corrected gently, a conversation we'd had dozens of times. "They're dealing with complex systemic challenges that require coordinated intervention." "If you say so," he replied, returning to the kitchen to check on dinner preparations. "Though I still think your talents could be better applied to problems with clear solutions." Mom appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "How many families are you working with now?" she asked. "Direct practice caseload is about 30 families," I explained. "But most of my time lately has been focused on program evaluation and policy development." "Policy development?" Dad repeated, pausing in his dinner preparations. "What kind of policies?" "Evidence-based interventions for child welfare systems," I said, accepting that this conversation would probably follow its usual pattern of Dad trying to understand work that seemed frustratingly unmeasurable to his engineering mindset. "Social work is bleeding heart nonsense," Dad grumbled, carrying plates to the dining room table. "Doesn't solve real problems. Just creates more paperwork and bureaucracy." I followed him to the dining room, helping Mom set the table with her good china. "Actually, evidence-based practice focuses on measurable outcomes and data-driven interventions." "But does it actually work?" he asked, settling into his chair at the head of the table. "Can you point to specific families and say, 'I fixed this problem'?" "Social work doesn't fix people," I explained, sitting down across from Mom. "It creates conditions and provides resources that enable families to address their own challenges." Dad served the barbecue chicken with the same methodical precision he'd applied to engineering projects. "That sounds like a lot of words to avoid admitting you can't measure success." "We can measure success," I said calmly. "Reduced child abuse rates, increased family stability, improved educational outcomes, decreased involvement with juvenile justice systems. The data exists." "If you say so," he replied skeptically. "Though it seems like those problems just keep getting worse despite all the social workers." I accepted his perspective without argument, the same way I'd learned to navigate family dynamics over years of professional training in conflict resolution and systems thinking. Dad's skepticism about social work reflected broader societal misunderstandings about the field, and family dinner wasn't the appropriate venue for comprehensive education about evidence-based practice. "Tell us about this project you finished," Mom suggested, clearly trying to redirect conversation toward more neutral territory. Policy research and program evaluation, I replied simply. Analyzing intervention outcomes and developing recommendations for system improvements. More reports that no one will read, Dad muttered, cutting his chicken with surgical precision. I mentioned helping a few families navigate complex situations, but kept the details general. Professional confidentiality prevented sharing specifics, and my family had heard enough case stories over the years to understand the basic challenges of child welfare work without needing additional examples. Jennifer works so hard, Mom said supportively. She's always writing reports and attending meetings about improving services for families. Meetings, Dad repeated with mild disdain. Engineers build things. We design systems that solve specific problems. Social workers have meetings about problems. Different types of problems require different approaches, I said diplomatically. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and Mom's famous apple pie. Dad reached for the television remote, flipping through channels until he found the evening news. The familiar rhythm of family time continued with half-focused attention on current events and gentle conversation about weekend plans. Let's see what's happening in the world, Dad said, settling back in his favorite recliner with his coffee. The local news covered traffic accidents and weather forecasts. National news discussed economic policy and international developments. Then the anchor transitioned to legislative coverage. Tomorrow's congressional hearings will address several significant policy initiatives, including proposed reforms to the nation's child welfare system. I glanced up from my coffee, recognizing the context for my upcoming testimony. The Child Welfare Modernization Act has attracted bipartisan support, the anchor continued, with lawmakers citing evidence-based research demonstrating the effectiveness of coordinated intervention programs. Child welfare reform, Mom said thoughtfully. That's the kind of work Jennifer does, isn't it? Similar issues, I confirmed, not mentioning my direct involvement in the policy development process. More bureaucracy, Dad commented predictably. Congress solving problems by creating more paperwork for social workers. The news segment concluded with information about tomorrow's hearing schedule, and Dad changed the channel to find something more engaging than legislative coverage. We spent the remainder of the evening discussing family plans for the upcoming holidays and Dad's latest home improvement projects. I should get going, I said around 9 o'clock, gathering my purse and laptop bag. Early morning tomorrow. More meetings? Dad asked with familiar resignation. Something like that, I replied, hugging them both goodbye. Thursday morning arrived with unusual nervousness. Despite years of public speaking and professional presentations, testifying before Congress felt different. The weight of representing not just my own research, but the entire social work profession's approach to child welfare, created pressure I hadn't anticipated. I reviewed my testimony one final time while drinking coffee in my kitchen, surrounded by research data that would hopefully translate into meaningful policy changes. 5 pages of carefully crafted language that synthesized 15 years of direct practice experience with rigorous program evaluation and outcome measurement. The hearing room filled gradually with lawmakers, advocates, researchers, and media representatives. I sat at the witness table alongside 3 other experts: a child psychologist, a family court judge, and a former foster youth who'd become a legal advocate. The diversity of perspectives represented the complex, interdisciplinary nature of child welfare reform. The subcommittee will come to order, Chairman Williams announced, and I felt the familiar focus that accompanied professional presentations. This was work I understood, policy development based on evidence and experience. Each witness provided opening statements before the questioning period began. I listened to my colleagues describe their perspectives on current system challenges and proposed solutions, recognizing themes that aligned with my own research findings. Dr. Martinez, Chairman Williams said, addressing me directly, your research on evidence-based intervention programs has been cited extensively in the policy development process. Can you explain how data-driven approaches improve outcomes for children and families? I leaned forward to the microphone, drawing on 15 years of experience translating complex social work concepts into language that non-practitioners could understand. Thank you, Chairman Williams. Evidence-based practice in social work means using interventions that have been rigorously tested and proven effective through controlled studies. Instead of relying on intuition or tradition, we implement programs with documented success rates and measurable outcomes. Can you provide specific examples of these measurable outcomes? Representative Chen asked. Certainly. The intervention programs we've evaluated show 37% reduction in repeat child abuse reports, 52% improvement in family stability measures, and 41% increase in children remaining safely with their families rather than entering foster care. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining research methodology, outcome measurement, and cost-effectiveness analysis. The questions from lawmakers demonstrated genuine interest in understanding how evidence-based social work practice could inform policy decisions and improve system efficiency. Dr. Martinez, Representative Johnson said near the end of my testimony, your research suggests that strategic investment in prevention services actually reduces long-term costs to child welfare systems. Can you elaborate on those findings? Every dollar invested in evidence-based prevention programs saves approximately $4 in crisis intervention costs, I explained. Families who receive appropriate early intervention services require less intensive and expensive services later. The hearing continued for 2 hours with detailed discussions about implementation strategies, funding mechanisms, and timeline for system reforms. I found myself energized by the opportunity to translate years of research into potential policy changes that could benefit thousands of families. Following the hearing, I spent another hour responding to media questions and speaking with congressional staff about implementation details. The complexity of translating research into legislation required careful attention to language and practical considerations. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for our regular Wednesday dinner, which had been rescheduled due to my congressional testimony. I felt exhausted but satisfied, the way I always did after significant professional presentations. How was your day, sweetheart? Mom asked as I walked through their front door. Productive, I replied, setting down my laptop bag. Long but productive. More meetings about social work? Dad asked from his position at the stove, stirring his famous pasta sauce. Something like that, I said, washing my hands at the kitchen sink. We settled into our familiar dinner routine with conversation about family news and weekend plans. Dad asked about my work with typical skepticism, and I provided general responses about policy research and program evaluation. The congressional testimony felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and television. Mom reached for the remote control, flipping through channels until she found the evening news. Let's see what happened in the world today, she said, settling back on the couch with her coffee. The local news covered typical evening stories: traffic, weather, local politics. Then the anchor transitioned to national coverage. On Capitol Hill today, lawmakers heard testimony about proposed reforms to the nation's child welfare system. I glanced up from my coffee, recognizing the hearing room where I'd spent my afternoon. The Child Welfare Modernization Act received strong support from expert witnesses who testified about the effectiveness of evidence-based intervention programs, the anchor continued. The camera cut to footage from the hearing room, showing the witness table where I'd sat alongside my colleagues. There I was, leaning toward the microphone during my testimony, wearing the navy blue suit I'd chosen specifically for the occasion. Among the witnesses was Dr. Jennifer Martinez, whose research on evidence-based social work practice has influenced policy development nationwide, the anchor explained as my name appeared on screen. Mom's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Honey, she said slowly, isn't that Jennifer speaking to Congress? Dad looked up from his newspaper, staring at the television screen where my photograph appeared alongside impressive statistics about intervention outcomes and cost-effectiveness analysis. Dr. Martinez's research demonstrates that strategic investment in prevention services can reduce child welfare costs while improving outcomes for families, the news anchor continued, showing footage of me explaining research findings to congressional representatives. That's our daughter, Mom said as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Jennifer is testifying before Congress. The news segment continued with clips from my testimony, highlighting key research findings and policy recommendations. Seeing myself on television felt strange, like watching a professional presentation by someone I barely recognized. Evidence-based social work practice, Dad repeated slowly, his engineering mind clearly processing new information. That sounds more systematic than I understood. Dr. Martinez's research has been published in major policy journals and cited by lawmakers developing child welfare legislation, the anchor explained, displaying publication statistics that I hadn't mentioned during family conversations. Published research? Dad asked, looking at me with confusion. You never mentioned publishing research. I write reports and evaluations, I said simply. Publication is part of the process for sharing findings with other practitioners and policymakers. The news segment concluded with information about the proposed legislation and timeline for congressional action. My photograph remained on screen as the anchor transitioned to other national news stories. Dad reached for the remote control and muted the television. The living room fell silent except for the distant sound of evening traffic outside their house. Jennifer, he said quietly, I had no idea what you were really doing. I'm doing social work, I replied. The same work I've been describing for years. But testifying before Congress, Mom said, still staring at the television screen. Your research influencing national policy. That's not what I pictured when you talked about helping families. Social work practice informs policy development, I explained. Direct service experience provides data that can improve systems for all families. Dad set down his newspaper and looked at me directly. All this time I've been dismissing your work as bleeding heart nonsense, and you've been conducting research that influences national legislation. Evidence-based practice requires rigorous data collection and outcome measurement, I said. The same systematic approach you used in engineering applied to human services. But why didn't you explain it that way? He asked. All these years of family dinners and you never mentioned testifying before Congress or publishing policy research. You never seemed interested in the technical aspects, I replied honestly. When I talked about research methodology or outcome measurement, your eyes would glaze over. Dad was quiet for a long moment, processing information that clearly challenged his understanding of social work as unmeasurable and ineffective. So when you talk about helping families, Mom said slowly, you're actually developing programs that help thousands of families. Direct practice with individual families provides insights that can improve services for many families, I confirmed. Casework and policy work are connected. And this research gets published in academic journals? Dad asked, his engineering background appreciating the peer review process. Policy journals, practice journals, research publications, I said. Evidence-based practice requires sharing findings so other practitioners can implement effective interventions. Dad stood up and walked to the bookshelf where Mom displayed family photographs. He picked up a picture from my graduate school graduation, where I stood proudly in my cap and gown with my Master of Social Work degree. I remember being worried about your career choice, he said, studying the photograph. Social work seems so unmeasurable. I thought you were avoiding concrete problem solving. Social work is concrete problem solving, I said gently. It just requires different tools than engineering. Tools like research methodology and outcome measurement, he said, beginning to understand the systematic nature of evidence-based practice. And data analysis, program evaluation, policy development, I added. The same logical thinking you taught me applied to family systems instead of mechanical systems. Mom reached for her phone, clearly searching for more information about my congressional testimony. There are articles about your research online, she said. Multiple publications about child welfare policy. Research dissemination is part of the job, I explained. Findings only create change when they're shared with practitioners and policymakers. All these years, Dad said, returning to his chair, I've been telling people my daughter works with troubled families, when I should have been saying she develops policies that improve child welfare systems. Both descriptions are accurate, I pointed out. Direct practice and policy work are equally important. Dad quietly asked to hear more about my work, and for the first time in 15 years, I found myself explaining research methodology and evidence-based practice to a family member who was genuinely curious about the systematic approach rather than dismissive of the unmeasurable nature. We talked for 2 hours about data collection, outcome measurement, policy development, and the peer review process for academic publication. Dad asked technical questions about research design and statistical analysis that reminded me why I'd been drawn to his logical, problem-solving approach throughout my childhood. This is nothing like what I imagined when you said social work, he admitted. I thought you were just listening to people's problems and offering emotional support. Emotional support is one intervention tool, I said. But evidence-based practice includes cognitive behavioral therapy, family systems interventions, crisis management protocols, advocacy strategies, and policy development. Policy development, he repeated thoughtfully. You're actually helping write the laws that govern child welfare systems. Research informs policy recommendations, I clarified. Lawmakers make the final decisions, but evidence-based research provides the foundation for effective legislation. 2 weeks later, when the Child Welfare Modernization Act passed committee review with strong bipartisan support, my family read every news article about the legislation. They understood enough about the policy development process to recognize my research contributions and appreciate the significance of evidence-based reform. Dr. Jennifer Martinez's research on intervention outcomes provided crucial data for lawmakers developing child welfare reform. Dad read aloud from the Policy Journal article at our next family dinner. Her evidence-based approach to social work practice influenced key provisions of the legislation. That's our Jennifer, Mom said proudly, and for the first time, I felt that my family truly understood what those words meant. The congressional testimony was professionally satisfying, but having my family finally understand and appreciate the systematic research-based nature of modern social work meant more than any policy recognition. They'd learned to see my career not as bleeding heart nonsense, but as rigorous, evidence-based practice that contributed to measurable improvements in child welfare systems. Next time someone asks what you do, Dad said, I'm going to need at least 10 minutes to explain it properly. Just tell them I help families, I suggested with a smile. Everything else is technical details. Technical details that influence national policy, he added firmly. And that's exactly how I plan to describe my daughter's career from now on. 6 months later, when the Child Welfare Modernization Act was signed into law, Dad called to congratulate me on my contribution to legislation that would benefit families nationwide. He'd spent months learning about evidence-based practice and could discuss social work research with the same analytical precision he'd once applied to engineering problems. I understand now why you chose social work, he said during that phone call. It's systematic problem-solving applied to the most important problems, helping families thrive. That's exactly what it is, I replied, grateful that my family had finally learned to appreciate the complexity and rigor of evidence-based social work practice.
Margaret slammed her hands on the table, making the crystal glasses shake. You're nothing but a gold digger taking advantage of my son, she shouted, her voice echoing through the dining room. In an instant, our peaceful family dinner turned into chaos. I'm Olivia, 29 years old, and I was watching my mother-in-law of 3 years completely lose control in front of everyone. The carefully prepared Sunday roast sat untouched as Margaret continued her rant. Mom, please, my husband James tried to interrupt, but she silenced him with a sharp wave of her manicured hand. No, I've kept quiet long enough. She grabbed my plate and threw it across the table, sending food flying. I want you out of my house and away from my son. Now, I stayed calm, though my heart pounded. I had learned that reacting only gave Margaret more power. The rest of the family, James's sister Emma, her husband, and their elderly Aunt Martha, sat in stunned silence. I have proof, Margaret declared, pulling out her phone. Those secret meetings, those long phone calls, I hired someone to follow you. James looked up in shock. You did what? Margaret shoved the phone across the table. Look, meeting strange men at K-Fizz, visiting fancy hotels in the middle of the day. She's either cheating or running some kind of scam. I almost laughed. Those meetings were with real estate agents and financial advisors. I had been quietly investigating suspicious money movements in Margaret's charity foundation, the one she used to maintain her social status. Margaret, I said, standing up. Be careful throwing around accusations. Are you threatening me? She snapped. Not at all. Just suggesting you focus on your own affairs. I let the words sink in. For a moment, I saw something flash in her eyes. Fear, maybe? Then it was gone, replaced by anger. Get out. Now, she screamed. I turned to James, hoping he would finally stand up for me, but he stared at his plate. Aren't you going to say anything? I asked. He hesitated. Maybe you should go. Just until Mom calms down. And that was it, the final betrayal. I grabbed my purse and nodded. Okay, James, if that's what you want. Margaret smirked. We all know you only married James for his money anyway. I walked to the door, then turned back. You seem very concerned about James's money. Maybe we should talk about the Henderson Foundation's finances sometime. Margaret's face turned pale. What about the foundation? James asked, subtly paying attention. Nothing. Margaret snapped. She's just trying to cause trouble. I didn't wait for more. I walked out into the cool evening air, hearing Margaret spin her story behind me. She would paint herself as the loving mother protecting her son from a scheming wife. What she didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. Every suspicious transfer, every hidden transaction, I had documented everything. Before meeting James, I worked in forensic accounting, something Margaret had forgotten in her rush to label me a gold digger. I got into my car and made a call. Hey, David? Yeah, it happened. She took the bait. Start the audit tomorrow. David, an old colleague, had been waiting for my signal. Margaret's need for control had finally led her into a trap of her own making. I drove to a small apartment I had secretly rented months ago. Margaret had been getting more aggressive, and I had known this day would come. Now I knew why. Her lies were catching up with her, and she needed me gone before I could expose her. As I settled into my new space, my phone buzzed with messages from James. Mom's really upset. Maybe give her time to cool off. Where are you staying? I ignored them. Let him worry. Let him sit in his mother's house, eating her food, listening to her lies. The truth would come out soon enough. I walked to my home office and stared at the web of transactions pinned to my wall. 3 years of watching, 6 months of investigating, all leading to this moment. Margaret thought she had won tonight, but she had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow would be very interesting. This morning I woke up to 17 missed calls, 5 from James, 8 from Margaret, 3 from Emma, and 1 from Aunt Martha. I ignored them all, made myself some coffee, and watched the sunrise from my apartment window. By 9 a.m., my phone rang again. It was David. It's done, he said. The audit team arrived at the foundation 30 minutes ago. You should have seen Margaret's face when they walked in with their briefcases. I smiled, sipping my coffee. Let me guess. She tried to stop them. Tried and failed. The board members you contacted last night had some serious questions about those offshore transfers. They're not leaving without answers. Perfect. Phase 1 was complete. Just then, James called again. This time I answered. Where are you? He demanded. Mom's freaking out. Auditors are at the foundation, and she says you're behind it. Am I? I kept my voice even. Isn't it normal for a charity to go through audits? Olivia, stop. What's going on? Maybe you should ask your mother about the Henderson Foundation's records, or about the money that went missing from the Children's Hospital Fund. Silence. Then finally, you're lying. But he didn't sound convinced. Check her office computer, I said. Password is your birthday. Look for a folder called Personal Projects. Everything you need is there. I hung up before he could respond. James had spent his life taking the easy way out, letting his mother control everything. Now he had to face the truth. Around noon, Emma knocked on my door. I wasn't surprised. She had always been smart enough to keep a spare key to her mother's filing cabinet. I found the documents, she said quietly. The missing hospital funds. Did you know all along? I stepped aside, letting her in. She looked pale, shaken. I started suspecting 6 months ago, I admitted. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have believed me over your mother? She sat down, running her hands through her hair. No, probably not. God, Olivia. She stole from sick children. She used foundation money for her shopping, her vacations, and made sure everyone saw her as a generous philanthropist while doing it. Emma swallowed hard. The hospital wing, the one in Dad's memory. She used that money to buy her beach house, didn't she? I nodded. Their father had left the foundation in Margaret's care, trusting her to do good. Instead, she had drained its accounts to fund her lifestyle. My phone buzzed. A message from David. Systematic fraud over 3 years. Board voting to involve authorities. And trying to destroy documents. Too late for that. I had copies of everything. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. She's going to lose everything, isn't she? The foundation, her reputation, probably her freedom. She looked at me, eyes filled with something between sadness and realization. And James? Did you do this to hurt him too? I turned to the window. I did this because it was right. Your mother stole from people who needed help, all while calling me a gold digger. Emma let out a slow breath. James went to the foundation this morning. After the auditors arrived, I've never seen him so angry. At me? At Mom. He caught her trying to delete files. That's when he finally understood. My phone buzzed again, Margaret. I declined the call. Emma sighed. She's been calling you all morning. Begging, threatening. She wants you to stop the audit. It's too late. I know. Emma stood. I should get back. The board wants to meet with the family. Will you? Come home. Home. That word didn't feel right anymore. Not yet, I said. James needs to figure some things out first. After she left, I sat at my desk preparing the final step. Margaret had built her life on lies and stolen money. Now the truth was coming for her. My phone buzzed again. A text from James. I'm sorry. I should have listened. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a moment, then set my phone aside. Some conversations could wait. There was still work to be done. Margaret thought she had won when she threw me out of her house. She had no idea she had just set everything in motion. Tomorrow, the board would decide the foundation's future, and Margaret would finally learn sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones you should fear the most. 3 months later, I sat in a courtroom and watched as Margaret was led away in handcuffs. The judge had been firm, 8 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement. Her expensive clothes and perfect hair couldn't hide the defeat on her face. The court finds the defendant's actions especially terrible, the judge had said. These funds were meant for children's medical care. James sat 2 rows behind me, his head down. He hadn't moved back in with his mother after that night. Instead, he had done something I never expected. He finally stood up for himself. She's controlled me my whole life, he admitted to me a month after the truth came out. I let her because it was easier than fighting. And I let her hurt you because I was too weak to stop her. I'm sorry, Olivia. I know that's not enough, but I'm trying to be better. The foundation was under new leadership. Emma, surprisingly, had stepped up to fix its reputation. She worked hard to regain the trust of donors and make sure everything was done right this time. As people left the courtroom, Aunt Martha caught my eye. She had been the first family member to reach out after Margaret's crimes were exposed. I always knew that woman was trouble. She had told me over tea. The way she treated you, it wasn't right. But you, my dear, you handled it beautifully. The media had a field day with the story. Prominent philanthropist exposed by daughter-in-law. Margaret's carefully crafted image crumbled as every detail of her fraud came to light. The missing hospital funds, the fake charity events, the offshore accounts, it all showed just how greedy she had been. Outside the courthouse, James walked up to me. Can we talk? We went to a nearby coffee shop. For a while, we just sat there, watching people pass by outside. The house is sold, he finally said. Mom's beach house too. The money is going back to the foundation. I nodded. Emma told me she's doing a great job. She is. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I let Mom control me for so long. Why I didn't stand up for you. And I'm learning. About boundaries, about being my own person. I know it's too late for us, but I wanted you to know what you did, exposing the truth. It set us all free in a way. I thought about everything that had happened in the past 3 months, the investigations, the media frenzy, the family drama. In the end, it hadn't been about revenge. It had been about doing what was right. The hospital wing, I said. The one meant to honor your dad. They're finally building it. James smiled, though there was sadness in his eyes. With the recovered funds. Dad would have liked that. As we left the coffee shop, Emma called. They found more documents in Mom's storage unit. Looks like she was stealing from Dad's company even before he died. Are you okay? I asked. Yeah, no, but I will be. We all will be. She paused. Thank you, Olivia, for being braver than all of us. That evening, I stood in my real apartment, the one I had returned to after everything was over. The wall where I had once pinned all my evidence was empty now, except for a single framed photo. James's father at the groundbreaking ceremony of his first hospital project. He looked happy, kind, the opposite of the woman he had married. My phone buzzed. A message from David. Foundation board meeting tomorrow. They want you to help with new security measures. I smiled. Things were so different now. Margaret had thought that throwing me out of her house would protect her secrets. Instead, it had led to her downfall. James and I would never be together again. Too much had happened. But something good had come from all of this: the truth, justice, and the chance to make a real difference. As I got ready for bed, another message came through from Aunt Martha. You did good, girl. Sometimes the hardest thing is standing up for what's right, even when it costs us everything. But I hadn't lost everything. I had gained something more important, the knowledge that one person can make a difference. Margaret's lies were over, and in their place, something honest could finally grow. Tomorrow, I would help rebuild the foundation and make sure no one could ever steal from it again. But tonight, I looked at my reflection and smiled, free at last. Sometimes, getting kicked out of a house is just the beginning of finding your way home. Anna sat at the dinner table, trying to stay calm as her sister-in-law, Jessica, sneered at her. You're just a placeholder, Anna, Jessica said, swirling her wine. My brother would never legally marry someone like you. Anna glanced at the wine, wondering if it would stain the white tablecloth. The room fell silent, except for a few awkward coughs. Her husband David spoke next. Jessica's right, he said, holding another woman's hand. His new girlfriend, Sarah. What you and I had was just convenient. Sarah and I have something real. Anna took a sip of wine, watching as her mother-in-law, Margaret, smiled at Sarah. The same woman who had spent years criticizing Anna was now welcoming her husband's mistress like a future daughter-in-law. Interesting, Anna finally said. Her calm tone unsettled them. They had expected tears, begging, or anger. But not this. That's all you have to say. Jessica pushed. David is leaving you. Anna wiped her lips with her napkin and smiled slightly. Would you like me to act surprised? Devastated. That would make you happy, wouldn't it? David frowned. This attitude is exactly why things didn't work out between us. Sarah understands family loyalty. Anna almost laughed. Loyalty? The same loyalty David had when he cheated? The same loyalty Jessica had when she covered for him. Margaret jumped in. Speaking of loyalty, she said, pretending to sound kind, I hope you understand that the house stays with David. Since you two were never officially married, you don't have any claim to it. They all looked so confident, so sure they had won. David had told his family he never legally registered their marriage, thinking it protected him. Anna reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. It's amazing what you can do online these days, she said, scrolling through her messages. Banking, shopping, registering a marriage. The room went silent. David's fork dropped. What are you talking about? He asked, his smugness gone. Oh, nothing, Hannah said, standing up. Just that while you were busy with Sarah, I was making sure our marriage was legally registered. All I needed was the signed certificate from our wedding. And, well, you signed the paperwork 6 months ago without reading it. Jessica's face turned pale. You're lying. David was always too busy to read what he signed, Anna replied. Every morning, I gave him documents for work, and he just signed them all without looking. David jumped up, knocking over his chair. You tricked me. That's illegal. Actually, it's not, Anna said, grabbing her purse. Oh, and about the house. You might want to check whose name is on the deed. You weren't the only one making plans. As she walked out, chaos erupted. Jessica yelled, Margaret demanded proof, and David frantically called his lawyer. This isn't over. Jessica screamed. Anna turned back with a smirk. You're right, it's just beginning. She looked at David. Make sure to read the divorce papers carefully this time. The door clicked shut behind her. As she got into her car, she texted her lawyer. It's done. They fell for it. Move to phase 2. The reply came instantly. Everything's ready. They won't know what hit them. Anna smiled as she started the car. They had underestimated her. They thought she was a quiet, obedient wife. But before she met David, she had spent 5 years working in contract law. And now they were about to learn exactly what that meant. The next morning, I sat in Maria's office, going over our strategy. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from David and his family. I ignored them, focusing on the legal documents in front of me. They've already contacted their lawyer, Maria said, sliding a paper toward me. They're claiming coercion and fraud, just as we expected. I scanned the document. Let me guess. They're saying David didn't realize he signed the marriage papers? Exactly, Maria said with a smirk. But they haven't found the video yet. Ah, the video. Our home security cameras had caught David bragging to Jessica about his plan. How he never registered our marriage, so I have no claim to anything. That recording would be very useful in court. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Margaret. You devious little snake. We trusted you. Maria pulled up another document. They've also filed for an emergency hearing to contest the house ownership. Seems they finally checked the records. I remember the day I transferred the house into my name. David had been too distracted by Sarah to notice the paperwork I slipped into his daily stack. Thanks to the power of attorney he had once signed without reading, I had full control. A knock at the door interrupted us. Maria's assistant entered with an envelope. This just arrived from the courthouse. The emergency hearing is set for 3 days from now. Perfect, Maria said, checking the details. That gives us time to prepare our surprise. The surprise was months in the making, a detailed file of every lie, every transaction, and most importantly, proof that David had been stealing from his company to fund his lavish lifestyle. Just then, my phone lit up with a message from Jessica. David is devastated. How could you do this to him, to our family? I laughed. Family. The same family that had treated me like an outsider. The same family that cheered when David replaced me with Sarah. Maria's voice pulled me back. Should we send the evidence about the stolen company funds? I nodded. Send it to the board first. Let them deal with him. By late afternoon, everything was falling apart for David. His company suspended him. Sarah, sensing trouble, had started avoiding him. Jessica, who had been so smug, was now scrambling to delete incriminating social media posts. That evening, I pulled into my driveway, my house now, not his, and saw David waiting on the porch. He looked exhausted, his confidence gone. We need to talk, he said as I approached. Actually, we don't, I replied. If you need something, speak to my lawyer. Come on, Anna, he pleaded. This isn't like you. We can work something out. I stopped and looked him in the eye. You're right, I'm not usually like this, but I protected myself from someone who wanted to leave me with nothing. I would have taken care of you, he insisted. Like you took care of our marriage? I shook my head. Instead of being honest, you plotted behind my back. His expression hardened. You tricked me into signing those papers. No, David, I said calmly. I just let you think you were tricking me. I stepped past him and unlocked the door. Now please leave before I call the police. This is my property after all. At that moment, my phone buzzed with an email from Maria. The subject line read, Board meeting concluded. Verdict attached. I smiled. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. David's carefully built life was crumbling around him. This isn't over, he called as I shut the door. I glanced at my phone and whispered, You're right, it's just beginning. The house felt different, lighter. Free, I walked through the rooms thinking about the changes I wanted to make. This place was mine now, and I had plans for it. Then, another message popped up, this one from Sarah. I didn't know about any of this. He told me you two were already separated. I left it unanswered. Sarah's realization about David was her problem now. Tomorrow was the emergency hearing, but I wasn't worried. Maria and I had prepared for every excuse, every lie, every attempt to make me the villain. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. I settled into my favorite chair by the window, watching the sunset. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The next phase was about to begin, and I was ready. The emergency hearing arrived with all the drama I'd expected. David's family filed into the courtroom like a united front. Margaret, Jessica, and even Sarah lingering in the back row. Their confidence lasted exactly 12 minutes. That's how long it took Maria to present our evidence. First came the video footage, David and Jessica plotting in our living room, discussing how to keep the marriage unofficial. Their faces paled as their own voices echoed through the courtroom. She'll never know, David had said on screen. We'll just keep stringing her along until I'm ready to leave. Next came the financial records. Every suspicious transaction, every misappropriated fund meticulously documented. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as the evidence mounted. But the final blow, that came from an unexpected source. Your Honor, Maria announced, "We'd like to call Sarah Mitchell to the stand." The look of sheer panic on David's face was almost comical. Sarah, who'd been served with a subpoena the previous day, walked to the witness stand like someone heading to their own execution. "Miss Mitchell," Maria began, "could you tell the court about the conversation you had with Mr. Harrison on March 15th regarding his marriage status?" Sarah glanced nervously at David before answering. He told me he'd never legally register his marriage to Anna. Said it was his way of protecting himself. And did he mention what would happen to his wife when he left her?" Sarah's voice trembled. "He said she wouldn't get anything. That was the plan all along." The courtroom erupted in whispers. I caught Jessica frantically texting, probably trying to salvage what she could of their crumbling defense. "Your Honor," David's lawyer interjected, "my client maintains that the marriage registration was obtained through deception." The judge held up her hand. "Counselor, your client was recorded explicitly discussing his plan to deceive his wife. Are you suggesting he should benefit from his own attempted fraud?" By the time the judge delivered her ruling, David's perfect facade had completely shattered. The marriage was declared valid, the property transfer upheld, and his attempts to contest them were dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the judge added, "I'm referring the evidence of financial misconduct to the district attorney's office for review." Outside the courtroom, Margaret attempted one final confrontation. "You've destroyed this family," she hissed, stepping into my path. "No, Margaret," I replied calmly. "Your family did that all on their own. I just made sure everyone could see the truth." Walking away from the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, though that was satisfying, but because I'd finally stood up to the people who tried to diminish me. 3 months later, I sat on my patio, sipping coffee and reading the morning news. David had pleaded guilty to financial misconduct, accepting a plea deal that included restitution. Sarah had moved to another state, presumably wiser about trusting married men with convenient stories. Jessica had gone surprisingly quiet on social media, her usual boasts about family loyalty conspicuously absent. My phone buzzed with a message from Maria. "Final paperwork filed. It's officially over." I smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The house had been redecorated, every trace of my old life with David replaced with choices that were purely mine. The garden, which Margaret had always criticized as too modern, was thriving under my care. "You know what's funny?" I said to Maria over lunch later that week. "They thought they were so clever, planning to leave me with nothing. They never realized they were teaching me exactly how to beat them at their own game." "Sometimes the best lessons come from our worst teachers," she replied with a knowing smile. As I drove home that evening, I passed David's new apartment, a stark downgrade from our former life. He was carrying groceries inside, looking older and tired. For a moment, I felt a twinge of, not regret, exactly, but recognition of how differently things might have gone if he'd just been honest. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My story wasn't about revenge or even justice, really. It was about refusing to be a victim in someone else's plot. About standing up and saying, "Not this time." I parked in my driveway, and looked at the home I'd fought to keep. The sunset painted the windows in shades of gold, and through them, I could see the life I built for myself, free from manipulation and lies. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't fighting back. It's being prepared, being patient, and letting people face the consequences of their own actions. They had underestimated me, seeing only what they wanted to see, the quiet, accommodating wife who would step aside without a fight. Instead, they got me, the real me, and that had made all the difference. The end. "Get out. My son deserves better than you," Linda, my mother-in-law, shouted. She pointed at the door, her face red with anger. I stood still, one hand on my pregnant belly, feeling my baby move inside me. "I know what you did with that mechanic. Everyone saw you," she yelled. "My James needs a loyal wife, not a cheater carrying another man's child." I stayed calm. I was 7 months pregnant, and I knew Linda would do something like this. She had tried to break up my marriage since James and I got engaged 3 years ago. "Linda," I said softly, "think about what you're doing. My name is Anna Mitchell. I'm 29, and this was my worst nightmare, being accused of cheating while carrying my first baby. But I wasn't going to cry or beg." "Don't Linda me," she snapped, grabbing my wedding photo from the mantel. "I have proof. Pictures of you meeting him every Tuesday for 3 months. Did you think no one would notice? I almost laughed. Those Tuesday meetings, they were with Dr. Marcus Thompson, a prenatal genetics specialist. But Linda had already decided I was guilty. James believes me, she smirked. I showed him everything. He's filing for divorce right now. That made me pause. James and I had tried for this baby for 2 years. He had been so happy, painting the nursery and reading parenting books. I couldn't believe he would turn on me so quickly, but Linda had always controlled him. Where is James? I asked. I want to hear it from him. He can't even look at you, she said. He's staying with me until you leave. This is his house. You have 1 hour to pack. I took a deep breath as my baby kicked again. All right, Linda, I'll pack. But first, I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. You should see this. She snatched it and tore it open. Inside was an appointment card for Dr. Thompson and his business card. For a second, she hesitated, then said, "This proves nothing. You could be seeing him and the mechanic." I smiled. "Check your mail tomorrow, Linda. You'll find the results interesting." "What results?" she asked, her confidence slipping. "The DNA test," I said. "The one proving this baby is James's. The one explaining why I've been seeing a genetic specialist. The one showing why this child might be your only grandchild." Her face paled. "What do you mean, only grandchild?" I said, "James has a genetic condition. It made getting pregnant difficult. That's why I needed special care. But you never bothered to check your own family's medical history." She was silent, processing the truth. James's father had died young, and there had always been rumors of heart problems in the family. Linda had ignored them. "You're lying," she whispered, but she didn't sound sure. "Am I?" I asked, walking upstairs. "Like I said, check your mail. And maybe call James. Tell him to hold off on those divorce papers." For the next hour, I packed. Downstairs, I heard Linda on the phone, her voice rising and falling. She was panicking, trying to fix the mess she had created. As I loaded my bags into my car, my phone buzzed. A message from James. "Where are you?" "Mom's saying something about DNA tests." I didn't reply. He had believed his mother without even talking to me. Tomorrow, he would know the truth. And then we'd have a very different conversation. I drove to my sister Sarah's house. As I pulled into her driveway, my baby kicked again. Tomorrow, the DNA results would prove everything. Sarah met me at the door. "Are you okay?" she asked. I hugged her. It went just as expected. Linda fell for it completely. "And the test results come tomorrow?" "Yes," I said, settling onto her couch. "And with them, the truth about James's genetic condition. The one Linda has been ignoring for years." Sarah handed me a cup of tea. "And James? Has he called?" I checked my phone. 3 missed calls, 5 texts, all from him. "He's trying now," I said. "But he needs to sit with this overnight. Tomorrow, when the truth comes out, we'll see if he's finally ready to stand up to his mother." As I lay in bed that night, feeling my baby move, I thought about trust, family, and control. Linda had always seen me as a threat. Tomorrow, she would learn that the real threat wasn't me, it was the truth. And this time, she wouldn't be able to escape it. The morning brought a flurry of texts and calls from James. I let them go to voicemail, knowing timing was everything. At precisely 9:30 a.m., my phone lit up with a call from Dr. Thompson's office. "The results have been delivered," his assistant confirmed. "Both copies, one to your mother-in-law's address and one to your husband's office." I thanked her and settled in to wait. Sarah brought me breakfast, but I could barely eat. Despite my confidence in the plan, my stomach was in knots. "How long do you think before the explosion?" Sarah asked, watching me pick at my toast. As if on cue, my phone erupted with Linda's ringtone. I put it on speaker. "How dare you?" Linda's voice trembled with rage and something else. "Fear. These results, this can't be true. You falsified them." "Dr. Thompson is one of the most respected genetic specialists in the country," I replied calmly. "Are you suggesting he risked his medical license to help me fake test results?" "But James, he can't be," she couldn't even say it. "Can't have a genetic heart condition, the same one that killed his father. The one you've been denying exists." I let the words hang in the air. "The condition that makes this pregnancy high risk and required those Tuesday appointments you were so suspicious about." The line went quiet except for Linda's rapid breathing. I could picture her standing in her pristine living room, clutching those papers, her perfectly maintained world crumbling around her. "Does James know?" she finally whispered. "He should be reading his copy right now." I hung up, hands shaking slightly. Sarah squeezed my shoulder in support. The next call came within minutes. "James." "Anna," his voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "I need to see you, please." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "I'm at Sarah's." "Can I come over?" "Now." I looked at Sarah, who nodded. "Yes." 20 minutes later, James's car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him sit there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, the manila envelope visible on his passenger seat. When he finally came to the door, he looked like he'd aged years overnight. Sarah let him in and quietly disappeared upstairs, giving us privacy. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, standing awkwardly in the living room. "Tell you what, James? That I was seeing a genetic specialist? That our baby needed extra monitoring? Or that your mother was following me, taking pictures and building a case to destroy our marriage?" He flinched. "I should have talked to you first. When Mom showed me those pictures, you should have talked to me about a lot of things," I cut in. "Like the fact that your father's death wasn't just a heart attack. Like the symptoms you've been having but ignoring because your mother insisted nothing was wrong." James sank onto the couch, the fight draining out of him. "She always said Dad's death was unexpected. That our family was healthy. When the doctor first suggested genetic testing during our fertility treatments, Mom said it was unnecessary. And you believed her because she's your mother and mothers don't lie, right?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "Even when Dr. Thompson confirmed the condition, even when he explained the risks to our baby, you still couldn't stand up to her." "I was scared," he admitted quietly. "Scared of having the same thing that killed Dad. Scared of passing it to our child. It was easier to pretend Mom was right." I sat beside him, placing his hand on my belly just as our baby kicked. "Our child will be fine." That's what those Tuesday appointments were for. Monitoring, preparing, making sure we have a plan. "But James, we can't keep living in your mother's world of denial." "The pictures," he started, "were of me entering a medical building. Did your mother bother to check what kind of doctors work there? Or did she just spin her story and expect you to believe it?" He hung his head. "I let her manipulate me. Again. And I almost lost you both because of it." "Almost," I agreed. "But now you have a choice to make. Because I won't raise our child in this environment. I won't watch you choose your mother's lies over our family's health." James pulled out his phone, where multiple missed calls from Linda flashed on the screen. Without hesitation, he turned it off. "I choose you," he said firmly. "You and our baby. Mom will have to accept that things are going to change." I leaned against him, feeling some of the tension of the past 24 hours ease. "She won't make it easy." "No," he agreed, "but I'm done letting her control us with lies. We'll face this condition together. Take all the precautions we need. No more hiding." As if in agreement, the baby kicked again, making us both smile. There would be more battles ahead. Linda wouldn't give up her control easily. But for the first time, I felt like James and I were truly united against her manipulation. Sarah came downstairs, carrying a tray of tea. "Everything okay down here?" I looked at James, saw the determination in his eyes, and nodded. "Getting there." My phone buzzed with another call from Linda. This time, James reached over and declined it. "Let her wait," he said. "We have more important things to focus on." Linda's reaction to being cut off was nuclear. Over the next week, she escalated from constant calls to showing up at Sarah's house, screaming about being denied access to her son. Each time, James calmly asked her to leave, making it clear he wasn't playing by her rules anymore. "You've poisoned him against me," she wailed during her third attempted visit. "My own son." "No, Linda," I said from behind James. "The truth did that all by itself. We'd already arranged to meet with Dr. Thompson as a family, including Linda, if she chose to attend." To our surprise, she showed up, though her perfectly maintained appearance couldn't hide her obvious distress. Dr. Thompson laid out everything clearly. James's genetic condition, the risks, the management plan for both him and the baby. Linda sat rigid in her chair, flinching at each mention of hereditary factors. "If this had been caught earlier," Dr. Thompson explained gently, "we could have started preventive treatments for James years ago. However, it's not too late to begin now. My husband." Linda's voice cracked. Could he have been saved if we'd known? The silence in the room was deafening. Early intervention significantly improves outcomes, Dr. Thompson said diplomatically. But we need to focus on the present. Your son and grandchild need proactive care. For the first time since I'd known her, Linda looked her age. The carefully constructed facade of perfection crumbled as she faced the consequences of her years of denial. I thought if I didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't be real, she whispered. After losing your father, James, I couldn't bear the thought of you having the same condition. James reached over and took my hand. But by denying it, you almost cost me my family, Mom. Anna was trying to protect our baby, and me, while you were trying to destroy her. Linda turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I was so convinced you were betraying James, I never considered that I was fighting for his life. I finished. For our child's future. She nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Over the next month, things began to shift. James started his treatments and Linda, perhaps seeking redemption, threw herself into researching the condition. She forwarded articles, joined support groups, and even organized her own medical screening. The day we found out we were having a little girl, Linda was surprisingly subdued. I want to apologize, she said after the ultrasound. Not just for the accusations, but for everything. I've spent years trying to control everything around me because I was terrified of losing James like I lost his father. Instead, I almost drove him away. I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse. Fear makes us do terrible things sometimes, I conceded. But moving forward, we need honesty. Complete honesty. And boundaries, James added firmly. We're happy to have you in our lives, Mom, but as grandma, not as the decision maker. Linda nodded, reaching out tentatively to touch my belly. I'd like that, to just be grandma. As my due date approached, Linda surprised us by maintaining her distance while still offering support. She helped with nursery preparations but asked before making any decisions. She shared her experiences but acknowledged when James and I chose different approaches. The night I went into labor, she sat quietly in the waiting room, respecting our wishes to have this time to ourselves. When complications arose, ones we were prepared for thanks to Dr. Thompson's monitoring, she remained calm, trusting in the medical team we carefully selected. After 18 hours, our daughter Emma Grace entered the world perfectly healthy despite the challenging delivery. When Linda finally held her, the tears that fell weren't about control or fear, but pure joy. She's beautiful, Linda whispered, gently touching Emma's tiny fingers. And she'll be strong, like her mother. I watched them together, remembering the screaming woman who kicked me out just months ago. We all will be, I said, as a family. 2 months later, we gathered for Emma's first set of genetic screening tests. Linda held my hand as we waited for results, no longer denying the importance of knowing, of being prepared. Everything looks good, Dr. Thompson announced, smiling. We'll continue monitoring, but she's doing wonderfully. Later that evening, as I watched Linda gently rocking Emma, James came up behind me. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For not giving up, for fighting for us, even when I didn't know we needed fighting for. I leaned back against him, remembering that terrible night when Linda had thrown me out. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that force us to face the truth. Linda looked up, catching our conversation. And sometimes the people we think are our enemies are actually our saviors, she added quietly. Emma cooed in her arms, oblivious to the journey that had brought us here. She would grow up knowing her medical history, understanding the importance of prevention and monitoring. But more importantly, she would grow up in a family that had learned the value of truth over denial, of unity over control. Well, Linda said, standing to place Emma in her bassinet, I should head home. Unless you need anything. We're good, Mom, James replied, hugging her. See you Sunday for dinner? She nodded, gathering her things without trying to reorganize anything or offer unwanted advice. At the door, she paused. I'm grateful, she said simply, for second chances. As we watched her drive away, I thought about how life's biggest challenges often bring unexpected gifts. In fighting to protect my child, I'd helped heal a family. In standing firm against Linda's manipulation, I'd given her the opportunity to become the mother and grandmother she needed to be. Sometimes the happiest endings come not from winning the battle, but from helping everyone find peace after the war.